This is going to be a quick aside to talk about your command line interface. Go ahead and open it up if you're not used to it. I'm going to make certain you know a handful of commands. We're not going to go in depth in this. If you'd like to learn more about the command line in depth, please use an online resource where you'll learn more on a track specific time for your particular content in the future. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few commands you want to know. When you're on your command prompt, first off, I have modified my prompt to very, very minimal. You might have a much longer prompt than this or a much different looking prompt. Mine's just an arrow saying I'm ready to type. So when you're on the command prompt, what you're going to do is a handful of commands that you want to make certain you know. I recommend you learn a handful at a time, and then later you add in more as you see more and more need to do things on your command line, which you will eventually find. First command I like to use is pwd. You may not find this particularly useful if you're on get bash, which already has this built into the way the prompt itself is looking. But pwd tells you where you are currently located on your computer on the current prompt. So I am currently in the users Brian Mermans folder. You might be somewhere else. If you'd like to get to your home folder, you can always type in cd, which is to change your directory. CD is change directory, and you can hit cd tilde. The tilde is next to the 1 on your keyboard. You just have to hold your buttons down and get there. And if you hit enter, you will move to your home directory. Now, I already was in my home directory, but it will move you to your home directory. So now again, I can use pwd to see where I'm at. So cd is changing directory. It's a very, very important one. So if I were to tell you a few things to know, pwd, cd, and the next one, ls. ls is to list your files. Now, there's lots of ways you can list your files. I'm going to leave it very minimal right now and just use regular ls. But ls will say what files are currently in the local directory you're at. It's the same information you would find by using your Finder. So if I were to open up my Finder here, or your Windows Explorer, if you have the Windows Explorer, you can type in Explorer on your start bar and open up the Windows Explorer. It's the exact same information. You can see my applications, BloomTech, BloomTech. I'm about to move into each one of those. So if I'd like to move into my BloomTech folder, I can cd, change directory, into the BloomTech folder. And I will now be in my BloomTech folder, pwd. I'm at that location. Let's list the files, ls. And there's my files in my BloomTech folder. Let's see if those match. So if I double click my BloomTech folder over here, I'll see my personal projects, my prior cohorts, and yeah, it's the same information. So it all matches up nicely. So again, commands that I would want you to know are pwd, print your working directory, ls, list the locations of your current files, list all the files currently there, and currently cd to change your directories. Now, all of these have other options on top of them, but I'm not going to go into depth with this. But if you want to, cd is to move both forwards and backwards. So if you had a new directory you want to go to, say I want to go into this folder called TensorFlow, I would do cd TensorFlow. And I move into it, and now I can tell I'm in my BloomTech TensorFlow folder. What if you'd like to go back up a level? I would use cd, and then a way to get to your parent is dot, dot. Dot, dot represents your parent's directory. So if I type that in, I will now be at BloomTech and no longer in TensorFlow. If I did it again, I'll now be at Brian Mermans and not BloomTech. So cd dot dot is a great one for moving around. You're allowed to change these together as much as you want. I'm not going into details right now, but just make certain you have a basics understanding of a few different ones. The last one I want to make certain you know is, you have pwd, cd, and ls. But I'm going to add in one more called mkdir. There's plenty of commands you can learn on your own, but let's make certain you have some basic ones for navigating around on your own file system. So make directories with this in it. Builds new directories. This is the equivalent of going onto any folder you want to and saying I want a new folder, either on a Finder for Mac or on Windows Explorer, where you right click and say I want a new folder. Make directory, mkdir, is the equivalent to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make certain I'm in my home directory. That's where I'm going to put things. If you want to put it somewhere else, find your own location to put things. So I'm in my home directory, and I currently don't have a folder. Oops. I don't currently have a folder that's really designed specifically to show my repositories that I'm going to work on at BloomTech. So I'm going to make a folder specifically for that. I'm going to make directory, mkdir space. I'm going to say, let's make a Bloom repos folder. Recommend you never ever put spaces in your folder names. It just makes things annoying. And just so you can see this, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my home folder over here. And you can watch. So when I hit enter, my make directory Bloom, it's going to generate the Bloom repos over there. So you can see it both visually in the GUI version. This is the GUI version on here, where you can actually see everything's got buttons, or you can see it locally with commands. You might find that the GUI is easier for you, and you're absolutely right. When you're starting off, the GUI is easier, but you might find yourself eventually finding that the terminal here is much faster for you and actually has more capabilities. That's just a few basic commands that you need to know for command line before we move to the next steps.